Welcome back, guys. So there are 5 of you in the room now.
Hello, Mr.
Morning. Carlos.
Hi, Mr.
Okay. Hi. Uh, so for 7 in the room. Guys, we stopped at this part in the first session. Now Liesel is encouraging Rudy, who is having his last race for the day. So far, he has won the 1,500 meters, the 400, the 200, and now with the most difficult one, the 100. And when the finalists reached the starting line, Rudy dropped to his knees and began digging starting holes with his hands. A balding brown shirt wasted uh, no time in walking over and telling him to cut it out. Liesel watched the adult finger pointing, and she could see the dirt falling to the ground as Rudy brushed his hands together. Okay, so the finalists are ready now for the 100 meters. When they were called forward, Liesel tightened her grip on uh, Yahya. Some other guys, again, Naguda and Yahya are joining. Okay, one of the boys Liesel, sorry, tightened her grip on the fence. One of the boys false started. You know, in a race, some people false start running before the gun was shot twice. It was Rudy. Again, the official had words with him, and the boy nodded once more, and he was out. Set for the second time, Liesel watched with concentration, and for the first few seconds, she could not believe what she was seeing. Another false start was recorded, and it was the same athlete who had done it. So, Rudy false started 3 times in front of her. She created a perfect race in which Rudy trailed but came home to win in the last 10 meters. What shall actually saw what she actually saw, sorry, however, was Rudy's disqualification. He was escorted to the side of the track and was made to stand there alone as the remainder of boys stepped forward. So, looks like Rudy is out of the race before he false started 3 times. They lined up and raced. A boy with rusty brown hair and a big stride won by at least 5 meters. Rudy remained. Later, when the day was complete and the sun was taken from him in street, Liesel sat with her friend on the footpath. They talked about everything false or everything else, from Dance Deutscher's face after the 1,500, sorry, to one of the 11-year-old girls having a tantrum after losing the discus. You know, the discus is a type of sport in which you throw something that looks like a plate. Before they proceeded to their respective homes, Rudy's voice reached over and handed Liesel the truth. For a while, it sat on her shoulder, but a few thoughts later, it made its way to her ear. Rudy's voice, I did it on purpose, which means he wanted to lose by false starting 3 times. Why? When the confession registered, Liesel asked the only question available. But why, Rudy? Why did you do it? He was standing with a hand on his hip, and he did not answer. There was nothing but a knowing smile and a slow walk that lulled him home. They never talked about it again. So, so far, Rudy has won 3 races and lost the fourth on purpose. Why? He didn't answer. For Liesel's part, she often wondered what Rudy's answer might have been had she pushed him. Perhaps 3 medals had shown that or what he'd wanted to show. That's enough for me. Or he was afraid to lose that final race in the end. The only explanation she allowed herself to hear was an inner teenage voice. Because he isn't Jesse Owens. This is her answer for herself. Only When she got up to leave, did she notice the three imitation gold medals sitting next to her? She knocked on the Steiner's door and held them out to him. You forgot these. He forgot his three gold medals. No, I didn't. He closed the door and Liesel took the medals home, so he left them for her. She walked with them down to the basement and told Max about her friend Rudy Steiner. He truly is stupid, she concluded. She concluded, clearly, Max agreed, but I doubt he was fooled. I doubt that he was fooled by someone. They both started work then. Max on his sketchbook, Liesel on the Dream Carrier, a book she was reading. She was in the latter stages of the novel when the young priest was doubting his faith. This is in the story of the book. After meeting a strange and elegant woman. When she placed it face down on her lap, Max asked when she thought she'd finish it. A few days at the most. He asked her, when are you going to finish the book? She said, a few days. Then a new one, he asked. The book thief looked at the basement ceiling. Maybe Max. She closed the book and leaned back. If I'm lucky. The next book, it's not the Duden Dictionary and Thesaurus as you might be expecting. No, the dictionary comes at the end of this small trilogy, and this is only the second installment. This is only the second part. This is the part where Liesel finishes the dream carrier and steals a story called A Song in the Dark. Another book she steals, A Song in the Dark. As always, it was taken from the mayor's house. Shows she visited the mayor's house again to steal a new title. It is A Song in the Dark. The only difference was that she made her way to the upper part of town alone without Rudy this time. There was no Rudy that day. But when she stole the book titled or entitled A Song in the Dark from the mayor's library, she went on her own that time. It was a morning rich with both sun and frothy clouds. Liesel stood in the mayor's library with, this is the time when she stole the book, with greed in her fingers and book titles at her lips. She was comfortable enough on this occasion to run her fingers along the shelves, a short replay of her original visit to the room, and she whispered many of the titles as she made her way along. Under the cherry tree, the 10th lieutenant. Typically, many of the titles tempted her, but after a good minute or two in the room, she settled for A Song in the Dark. She chose this one, most likely because the book was green and she did not yet own a book of that color. The engraved writing on the cover was white, so the color of the book was green, but the title was engraved and white, and there was a small insignia of a flute between the title and the name of the author. There was something like a flute uh, drawn or engraved in the book. She climbed with it from the window with the book, A Song in the Dark, saying thanks on her way out. Without Rudy, she felt a good degree of absence, but on that particular morning, for some reason, the book thief was happiest alone. She went about her work and read the book next to the Amber River, far enough away from the occasional headquarters of Victor Schimmel and the previous gang of Arthur Berg. No one came, no one interrupted, and Liesel read four of the very short chapters of A Song in the Dark, and she was happy. It was the pleasure and satisfaction of good stealing. A week later, the trilogy of happiness was completed. So she read the first book, the second book. In the last days of August, a gift arrived, or in fact was noticed. It was the late afternoon. Liesel was watching Christina Muller jumping rope on High Street or Himmel Street. Rudy Steiner skidded to a stop in front of her on his brother's bike. Do you have some time? He asked. She shrugged. For what? I think you'd better come. He dumped the bike and went to collect the other one from home. In front of her, Liesel watched the pedal spin. They rode up to Grandstrasse. Remember, this is the name of the street where rich people lived and where the mayor lived, where Rudy stopped and waited. Well, Liesel asked, what is it? Rudy pointed. Look closer. Gradually, they rode to a better position behind the blue spruce tree. Through the prickly branches, Liesel noticed the closed window and then the object leaning on the glass. Is that Rudy nodded. They debated the issue for many minutes before they agreed it needed to be done. It had obviously been placed there intentionally, like maybe a ladder or something, to help them go down easily, and if it was a trap, it was worth it. Among the powdery blue branches, Liesel said, a book thief would do it. Uh, she dropped the bike, observed the street, and crawled the yard. The shadows of clouds were buried among the dusky grass. Were they holes for falling into, or patches of extra darkness for hiding in? Her imagination sent her sliding down one of those holes into the evil clutches of the mayor himself. Maybe she said to herself, this is a trap. I'll fall in the hands of the mayor himself. If nothing else, those thoughts distracted her, and she was at the window even quicker than she'd hoped. It was like the Whistler all over again. The window was all over. Her nerves licked her palms. Small streams of sweat rippled under her arms. When she raised her head, she could read the title, The Complete Duden Dictionary, Anthesaurus. Briefly, she turned to Rudy and mouthed the words, It's a dictionary. He shrugged and held out his arms. She worked methodically, sliding the window upward, wondering how all of this would look from inside the house. She envisioned the sight of her thieving hand reaching up, making the window rise until the book was filled. It seemed to surrender slowly like a falling tree. Got it? There was barely a disturbance or sound. She didn't hear any disturbance or any sound. The book simply titled toward her and took it with her free hand. She even closed the window, nice and smooth, then turned and walked back across the potholes of clouds. Nice, Rudy said as he gave her the bike. So, this is the third book she steals from the mayor's house in this part. They rode toward the corner where the day's importance reached them. Liesel knew it was the feeling again of being watched. A voice pedaled inside her to lapse. Look at the window, look at the window. She was compelled. She had to look at the window. Like an itch that demands a fingernail, she felt an intense desire to stop. She wanted to stop and look back at the window of the mayor's library. She placed her feet on the ground and turned to face the mayor's house and the library window, and she saw. Certainly, she should have known this might happen, but she could not hide the shock that loitered inside when she witnessed the mayor's wife standing behind the glass. This means that the mayor's wife put something there and left the window open to let Liesel climb and go in the room or in the library or to make her task easier. She was transparent, she was like thin, but she was there. Her fluffy hair was as it always was, and her wounded eyes and mouth and expression held themselves up for viewing. Very slowly, she lifted her hand to the book thief on the street, a motionless wave. So, uh, the mayor's wife did this to help the girl, or she wanted her to take the books she wanted, okay, from the library. Very slowly, as we said, she greeted her. In her state of shock, Liesel said nothing to Rudy or herself. She only steadied herself and raised her hand to acknowledge the mayor's wife in the window. Duden dictionary meaning Verzeihung, forgiveness. To stop, this is another word taken from this dictionary. Verzeihung, which means forgiveness. To stop feeling anger, this is the definition. Animosity or resentment. Related words, absolution, acquittal, mercy. Okay, these are some synonyms of the word. On the way home, they stopped at the bridge and inspected the heavy black book. You know, a dictionary is a big book. As Rudy flipped through the pages, he arrived at a letter. He picked it up and looked slowly toward the book thief. It's got your name on it. So maybe the mayor's wife left Liesel a letter and put it in the dictionary. The river ran. Liesel took hold of the paper, the letter. Dear Liesel, this is the letter. I know you find me pathetic and loathsome. You know, a loathsome means a hateful person. Look that word up if you don't know it. But I must tell you that I am not so stupid as to not see your footprints in the library. I saw your footprints, not that stupid. When I noticed the first book missing, I thought I had simply misplaced it. But then I saw the outlines of some feet on the floor in certain patches of the light. It made me smile when I saw your footprints. It made me smile. I was glad that you took what was rightfully yours. I then, because she offered to give her the Whistler. Remember the first book she stole, the Whistler? The mayor's wife offered to give it to the girl, but she refused. She says to her here, I was glad that you took what was rightfully yours because I offered it to you, but you refused to take it. So it's yours. I then made the mistake of thinking that would be the end of it. When you came back, I should have been angry, but I wasn't. I could hear you the last time, but I decided to leave you alone. You only ever take one book. You always take one book, and it will take 1,000 visits till all of them are gone. My only hope is that one day you will knock on the front door and enter the library in the more civilized manner. One day, I hope you would knock on the door and enter as a guest or a visitor, not as a thief. Again, I'm sorry, we could no longer keep your foster mother employed. I'm sorry for firing Rosa. Lastly, I hope you find this dictionary and thesaurus useful as you read your stolen books. Yours sincerely, Elsa Herman. We'd better head home, Rudy suggested, but Liesel did not go. She didn't feel happy with these words. So, of course, Liesel struggled back up to 8 Grandstrasse and sat on the familiar territory of the front entrance. The book was with Rudy, but she held the letter and rubbed her fingers on the folded paper. As the steps grew heavier around her, she tried 4 times to knock on the daunting flesh of the door, but she could not bring herself to do it. She wanted to go and talk to the mayor's wife, but she didn't dare to do it or dare do it. The most she could accomplish was to place her knuckles gently on the warmness of the wood. Again, her brother found her from the bottom of the steps, his knee healing nicely. He said, Come on, Liesel, knock. As she made her second getaway, she could soon see the distant figure of Rudy at the bridge. The wind showered through her hair. Her feet swam with the pedals. Liesel Meminger was a criminal, but not because she'd stolen a handful of books through an open window. You should have knocked, she thought. And although there was a good portion of guilt, there was also the juvenile trace of laughter. As she wrote, she tried to tell herself something. You don't deserve to be this happy, Liesel, because she was smiling when she left. You really don't. You don't deserve to be that happy. Why are you smiling? Why are you laughing? Can a person steal happiness? Or is it just another internal, infernal human trick? Liesel shrugged away from her thoughts. She crossed the bridge and told Rudy to hurry up and not to forget the book, as he forgot her shoes before. They rode home on rusty bikes. The road home, they rode home a couple of miles from summer to autumn and from a quiet night to the noisy breath of the bombing of Munich. The next part, the sound of sirens. Which sirens? I think you know that the sirens of the warning, okay? Warning sirens. With the small connection or collection of money Hans had earned in the summer. You know, Hans spent a busy summer painting over the blinds or the curtains of the people. All the people were blackening their blinds. Why? Because they didn't want to be targets or targeted by the striking planes. He uh, brought some or brought home a second-hand radio. This way, he said, we can hear when the raids are coming, even before the sirens start. They make a cuckoo sound and then announce the regions at risk. The region at risk. Okay, when the region is at risk, the radio makes a cuckoo sound. You know, the cuckoo is a bird. He placed it on the kitchen table and switched it on. They also tried to make it work in the basement for Max, but there was nothing but static and served voices in the speakers. In September, they did not hear it as they slept. Either the radio was already half broken, or it was swallowed immediately by the crying sound of sirens. So there was a strike, an attack. A hand was shoved gently at Liesel's shoulder as she slept. Papa's voice followed in it, or it in, afraid. Liesel, wake up. We have to go, because the sirens went off. There was the disorientation of interrupted sleep, and Liesel could barely decipher the outline of Papa's face. The only thing truly visible was his voice. In the hallway, they stopped. Wait, said Rosa. Through the dark, they rushed to the basement. The lamp was lit. Max edged out from behind the paint cans and drop sheets. His face was tired and he hitched his thumbs nervously into his pants. Time to go, huh? Hans walked to him. Yes, time to go. He shook his hand and slapped his arm. We'll see you when we get back, right? Of course. Rosa hugged him, and Liesel did the same. Goodbye, Max. They went to the shelter. Of course, he's not going to join them. Weeks earlier, they'd discussed whether they should all stay together in their own basement or if the three of them should go down the road to a family by the name of Fiddler. It was Max who convinced them. They said, it's not deep enough here. I've already put you in enough danger. Hans had nodded. It's a shame we can't take you with us. It's a disgrace, but it's out of our hand. If we take you with us, people would ask who this person is. It's how it is. It's out of our hand, as I said. Outside, the sirens howled at the houses, and the people came running, hobbling, and recoiling as they exited their homes. Night watched. Some people watched it back, trying to find the tin can planes as they drove across the sky. People were waiting for the planes to come and attack. Hemel Street was a procession of tangled people, all wrestling with their most precious possessions. In some cases, it was a baby. In others, a stack all the positions a person has. Some a woman running with her baby. This is all what she has. In others, a stack of photo albums or a wooden box. This was all they had. Liesel carried her books between her arm and her ribs. Frau Holzapfel was heaving a suitcase, was carrying or pulling a suitcase, laboring on the footpath with bulbous eyes and small stepped feet. Papa, who'd forgotten everything, even his accordion, rushed back to her and rescued the suitcase from her grip. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, what have you got in here? He asked. An anvil? Are you putting a heavy thing in it? You know, an anvil is something made of metal on which we can cut things. Frau Holzapfel advanced along him and said, the necessities. I just put the necessities in my suitcase. The Fiedlers lived 6 houses down. They were a family of four, all with wheat colored hair and good German eyes. More important, they had a nice deep basement. 22 people crammed themselves into it, including the Steiner family, Frau Holzapfel, Pfeffikus, a young man, and the family named Jensen. In the interest of a civil environment, Rosa Huberman and Frau Holzapfel were kept separated, though some things were above pretty argument. Uh, One light globe dangled from the ceiling, and the room was dank and cold. Jagged walls jutted out and poked people in the back as they stood and spoke. The muffled sound of sirens leaked in from somewhere. They could hear a distorted version of them that somehow found a way inside, although creating a considerable apprehension about the quality of the shelter. At least they could hear the three sirens that would signal the end of the raid and safety. They didn't need a lot مش عارف ايه an air raid supervisor. So the raid was over. The attack was over. It wasn't long before Rudy found Liesel and was standing next to her. His hair was pointing at something on the ceiling. Isn't this great? She couldn't resist some sarcasm. It's lovely. Ah, come on, Liesel, don't be like that. What's the worst that can happen? Apart from all of us being flattened or fried or whatever bombs do, they are taking it sarcastically. Lisa looked around, gauging the faces, studying the faces. She started compiling a list of who was most afraid. The hit list. Uh, Frau Holzapfel, she was the most afraid. Mr. Fiedler himself, the owner of the house, the young man, and Rosa Hopperman. Frau Holzapfel's eyes were trapped open. Her wiry frame was stooped forward, and her mouth was a circle. Herr Fiddler, Mr. Fiddler, busied himself by asking people, sometimes repeatedly, how they were feeling. The young man, Rolf Schultz, kept to himself in the corner, speaking silently at the air around him, castigating it, blaming the air. His hands were cemented into his pockets. Rosa rocked back and forth, ever so gently. She was moving back and forth. Liesel, she whispered, come here. She held the girl from behind, tightening her grip. She sang a song, but it was so quiet that Liesel could not make it out. The notes were born on her breath, and they died at her lips. Next to them, Papa remained quiet and motionless. At one point, he placed his warm hand on Liesel's cool skull. You'll live, it said, and it was right. To their left, Alex and Barbara Steiner stood with the younger of their children, Emma and Bettina. The two girls were attached to their mother's right leg. The oldest boy, Kurt, stared ahead in a perfect Hitler Youth stance, holding the hand of Karen, who was tiny. Even for her 7 years, the 10-year-old Anna Marie played with the pulpy surface of the cement wall. On the other side of the Steiners were Pfeffikus and the Jensen family. Remember Pfeffikus, the man who used to say bad words or swear all the time. He swears all the time. Pfeffikus kept himself from whistling. He was always whistling as well. The bearded Mr. Jensen held his wife tightly, and their two kids drifted in and out of silence. This is Guy's description of the people in the basement, the 22 of them. Occasionally, they pestered each other, and they held back when it came to the beginning of true argument. After 10 minutes or so, what was most prominent in the cellar was a kind of non movement. They were all silent, or they were sitting still, or standing still. Their bodies were welded together, and only their feet changed position or pressure. Stillness, silence, was shackled to their faces. They watched each other and waited. Duden dictionary meaning, we have Angst. Angst in German means fear, and this is the definition of fear, of course. From other shelters, of course, there were some strong shelters where the people of Himmel Street were hiding. There were stories of singing Deutschland über alles, or Germany above all, or Tahya Almania, or of people arguing amid the staleness of their own breath. No such things happened in the Fiddler shelter. In that place, there was only fear and apprehension, and the dead song at Rosa Hopperman's cardboard lips. The dead song, the song which wasn't heard by uh, uh, Liesel herself. Not long before the siren signaled the end, Alex Steiner, uh, hello, the man with the immovable wooden face, Rudy's father, coaxed his kids or the kids from his wife's legs. He was able to reach out and grapple for his son's free hand. Kurt, still stoic and full of stare, took it up again and again. This is the description of the situation. They were all hiding. I'll skip this long part. Uh, I'll move to here. The Sky Stealer. Guys, I'd like to remind you again that you are supposed to read, finish part 7, and go on to complete part 8. But in the term 3 exam, you should start studying parts 6 and 7. Part 6 and 7. The Sky Stealer, the first raid, as it turned out, was not a raid at all. So it was just a warning, the first attack. Had people waited to see the planes, they would have stood there all night. That accounted for the fact that no cuckoo had called from the radio. So it wasn't an attack, it wasn't a raid at all. This is why the radio didn't warn them. The Malking Express reported that a certain flag tower operator had become a little overexcited. He'd sworn that he could hear the rattle of planes and see them on the horizon. He sent the word. So it was like a rumor, and it wasn't an attack at all. He might have done it on purpose, maybe, Hans Huberman pointed out. Would you want to sit in a flag tower, shooting up at planes carrying bombs? Sure enough, as Max continued reading the article in the basement, it was reported that the man with the outlandish imagination had been stood down from his original duty. His fate was most likely some sort of service elsewhere. Good luck to him, Max said. He seemed to understand as he moved on to the crossword. The next raid was real. So the first raid was fake, guys. Uh, some man, some guard in one of the towers, watchtowers maybe, uh, misunderstood the situation and said that he saw or could hear the sound of attacking planes, but it was just a rumor. On the night of September 19th, the cuckoo called from the radio, so it was a real attack, and it was followed by a deep, informative voice. It listed Malking as a possible target. Again, Himmel Street was a trail of people, and again, Papa left his accordion. Rosa reminded him to take it, but he refused. I didn't take it last time, he explained, and we lived. War clearly blurred the distinction between logic and superstition. Uh, eerie means weird or strange, followed them down to the fiddler's basement. Again, I think it's real tonight. I think it's real tonight. The raid is real, the attack is real, said Mr. Fiddler. And the children quickly realized that their parents were even more afraid this time around. Reacting the only way they knew, the youngest of them began to wail, cry, and cry as the room seemed to swing. Uh, Even from the cellar, they could vaguely hear the tune of bombs. Air pressure shoved itself down like a ceiling, as if to mash the earth. A bite was taken of Malking's empty street. So one of the bombs made a hole in one of the in Malking's empty streets. Rosa held furiously onto Liesel's hand. The sound of crying children kicked and punched. It was a real attack, and the sound of bombing uh, made the children cry and the old people afraid. Even Rudy stood completely erect. He was standing still, feigning nonchalance, tensing himself against the tension. Arms and elbows fought for room. He wanted to find some space. Some of the adults tried to calm the infants, the babies. Others were unsuccessful in calming themselves. Shut the kid up, Frau Holzapfel clamored. She said to one of the mothers, "Shut your kid up." But her sentence was just another hapless voice in the warm chaos of the shelter. Grimy tears were loosened from children's eyes, so the children were crying, and the smell of night breath, underarm sweat, and overworn clothes was stirred and stood in what was now a cauldron swimming with humans. Although they were not, they were right next to each other, Liesel was forced to call out, "Mama!" Again, "Mama, you're squashing my hand." What? My hand, because there was a large number and it was chaotic. Rosa released her, and for comfort to shut out the din of the basement, Liesel opened one of her books and began to read. In this situation, the book on top of the pile was The Whistler, and she spoke it aloud to help her concentrate. The opening paragraph was numb in her ears. "What did you say?" Mama roared, but Liesel ignored her. She remained focused on the first page. Liesel went on reading. When she turned to page 2, it was Rudy who noticed. He paid direct attention to what Liesel was reading, and he tapped his brother and his sisters, telling them to do the same. Hans Huberman came closer and called out, and soon a quietness started bleeding through the crowded basement. By page 3, everyone was silent but Liesel. All of them were listening to Liesel, and this is the end of the session. Thank you very much. As I told you, you should finish up to or start reading part 8, because you should be doing up to its half. And in the third term exam, you'll have parts 6 and 7. Thank you.